Hey guys, my name's Eric, and until recently, I thought I had a solid grip on my life. I've been married to my wife Lisa for 12 years. We have a 10-year-old son, Michael, who's the best kid I could have asked for. We live in Chicago in a townhouse near the Loop. From the outside, I'm sure we looked like the perfect little family. But, as I've learned, appearances can be deceiving. I met Lisa on one of those unforgettable nights that stick with you. It was at a bar downtown. I was out with a couple of buddies after work, just looking to blow off some steam. Lisa was there with her friends, and even in a crowded room, she stood out. She was magnetic, the kind of woman who commanded attention without even trying. She was confident, charming, and had this laugh that made people turn their heads. I remember working up the nerve to go talk to her, expecting to get brushed off, but instead, we hit it off immediately. We talked for hours about everything, our careers, our goals, the kind of life we wanted. By the end of the night, I felt like I'd met someone special. A few weeks later, we went on our first date, and within 2 years, we were married. For the longest time, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Lisa was ambitious and driven, always looking for the next big thing in her career as a marketing executive. She could be a little self centered at times. She thrived on compliments and always made sure she was the center of attention at gatherings. But I figured that was just Lisa being Lisa. It was part of her charm, or so I thought. We built a life together. I worked my way up in logistics, eventually landing a managerial position. Lisa brought in a good income too, and between the two of us, we provided Michael with a comfortable life. We had our share of challenges, sure, what marriage doesn't, but I always believed we'd face them together. Lately, though, things have felt off. Lisa's been distant in a way I can't quite put my finger on. It started small. She'd zone out during dinner, barely listening to Michael's stories about school or my updates about work. Then she started spending more time on her phone. At first, I thought it was just work emails or her endless scrolling on Instagram, but then I noticed how she'd angle the screen away from me when I walked by. She laughed at messages I never got to see, and when I asked her what was so funny, she'd just shrug and say, "Oh, nothing important." The late nights at the office became more frequent too. Lisa has always been a hard worker, but now she's coming home at odd hours, claiming she's stuck on deadlines or attending client dinners. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but something in her tone, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked her about her day, made my stomach churn. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Lisa's job is demanding, and she's always been social. Lisa's job is demanding, and she's always been social. But the little things started piling up. Her phone never left her side, even when she went to the bathroom. She'd get messages at strange times, and if I asked who it was, she'd brush it off like I was crazy for even asking. For weeks, I tried to push the doubts out of my mind, convincing myself that this was just a rough patch, that the stress of work and parenting was getting to us. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know how bad it really was. Things didn't improve. In fact, they got worse. Lisa was always busy, always preoccupied. I'd catch her smiling at her phone, lost in some conversation she clearly didn't want to share with me. When I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Eric, not everything is about you. It's just work." But it wasn't just work. I knew it wasn't. You don't giggle at work emails or act like a teenager with a crush when your boss texts you. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband snooping through his wife's stuff. So I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking it. But then there were the late nights. Lisa started coming home later and later, always with some excuse. Client meetings ran long, or we had to stay late to prep for a presentation. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But every time she walked through the door, there was this air of detachment about her, like she'd just come back from a completely different world. And then there was her appearance. Lisa had always taken care of herself. She loved fashion, always looked put together, but lately she'd taken it up a notch. She started wearing dresses she hadn't touched in years, spending extra time on her makeup and spritzing on perfume even when she claimed she was just going to the office. When I casually mentioned it, she waved it off with a laugh. "I just want to feel good about myself," she said. "Is that a crime?" It wasn't a crime, but it sure as hell felt suspicious. The final straw came during one of those rare evenings when Lisa and I were sitting together in the living room. I was scrolling through TV channels, and she was on her phone, as usual. I caught a glimpse of her screen out of the corner of my eye, just enough to see a message pop up. It was from someone named Tom. "Who's Tom?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Her head snapped up, and she locked her phone so quickly it was almost comical. "Oh, just someone from work," she said, her voice a little too breezy. "We're working on a project together." That's funny, I said, forcing a smile. He seems pretty eager for a work meeting, she laughed. One of those fake, nervous laughs that only made her look guiltier. You're reading too much into it, Eric. Seriously. You need to relax. Relax, that's what she told me. But how the hell was I supposed to relax when my wife was acting like this? I didn't say anything else that night, but my mind was racing. I didn't have solid proof of anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa was hiding something. Something big. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to her behavior, the secretive texting, the sudden girls' nights out that she hadn't mentioned before, the way she'd get defensive anytime I asked a simple question. It all felt wrong, but I still didn't have anything concrete. That's when I decided I needed to dig deeper. I didn't want to believe my wife could betray me, but I wasn't going to ignore the signs anymore. Something was going on, and I was going to find out what. The breakthrough I wasn't expecting came from the most innocent source, my son Michael. One evening we were sitting together in his room, going through his math homework. Lisa was working late again, and I was doing my best to keep things normal for Michael, even though my mind was racing with doubts. Out of nowhere, Michael put down his pencil and looked up at me with those big, curious eyes of his. Dad, he said, his voice hesitant, who's the man that comes over when you're not home? For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My stomach dropped and my heart started pounding. What do you mean, buddy? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Michael shrugged like it was no big deal. Sometimes when you're at work or on a trip, a man comes over. He and Mom sit in the kitchen and talk. I thought he was a friend of yours. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My brain struggled to process what he'd just said. A man in my house with Lisa? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew I couldn't let Michael see how much this was affecting me. Do you know his name? I asked, trying to sound casual. Michael shook his head. No, but he's tall and he has dark hair. He's nice, though. He always says hi to me when he's here. I forced a smile, even though I felt like I was going to be sick. Thanks for telling me, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. You don't need to worry about it, okay? I'll take care of it. He nodded and went back to his homework like nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. Michael's words confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just paranoia or me reading too much into things. Lisa was hiding something. Someone. And she was doing it in our own home. That night, after Michael went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't confront Lisa without proof, but I couldn't ignore this any longer either. Michael's innocence had unknowingly ripped the blinders off. And now, there was no going back. After Michael's words, I knew I couldn't ignore the situation anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. But I also knew I couldn't confront Lisa without proof. If I went in blind, she'd twist the story or brush it off as a misunderstanding. I needed something undeniable. That's when I decided to set up cameras. It wasn't an easy decision. I felt sick, even thinking about spying in my own home. But Michael's innocence and my gut instincts left me no choice. If Lisa was hiding something, I had to know. I ordered a few discrete cameras online and waited until Lisa was out running errands to install them. I placed one in the kitchen, another in the living room, and a third near the front entrance. The whole process felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie. My hands were shaking the entire time, but I managed to get everything set up without her noticing. When I finished, I sat down and stared at my phone, which was now connected to the cameras. Part of me felt dirty, like I was betraying the trust that a marriage should be built on, but another part of me, the part that had seen the cracks in Lisa's story, knew this was the only way to get the truth. Now, all I could do was wait. The next few days were excruciating. Every time my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the cameras, my heart raced. I checked the feed only to see Lisa moving around the house, doing nothing out of the ordinary. For a moment, I wondered if I'd been wrong, if Michael had simply misunderstood what he saw. But those thoughts didn't last long. Lisa's behavior was still off, too rehearsed, too careful. She spent more time on her phone than ever, and when I'd ask her how her day was, her answers were vague and rushed. It was like she was trying to dodge any real conversation. It was infuriating, but I kept my cool, knowing that the cameras would reveal the truth eventually. On the surface, everything seemed normal. We ate dinner together, talked about Michael's school projects, and even sat down to watch a movie one night. Lisa was her usual self, charming, engaging, and seemingly carefree, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all an act, a performance she was putting on for my benefit. Then it happened. One evening while I was at work, my phone buzzed with another motion alert. My stomach tightened as I opened the app, dreading what I might find. This time, it wasn't just Lisa moving around the kitchen or tidying up. There was someone else, a man, walking through the front door. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. He was tall, with dark hair and a casual confidence that made me sick to my stomach. Lisa greeted him at the door, and they moved into the kitchen. They weren't doing anything overtly suspicious, just talking, but their body language said it all. The way she leaned in, the way he smiled. It was more than friendly. I saved the footage, my hands trembling as I set my phone down. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. Michael's words, the late nights, the guarded phone, it all made sense now. There was no turning back from this. That night, when Lisa came home, she acted like everything was fine. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, and chatted about work like nothing had happened. It took every ounce of self-control I had to keep my composure. But I knew I couldn't confront her just yet. I needed more. I needed her to bury herself in her lies before I dropped the hammer. Now, I wasn't just waiting for answers, I was preparing for the fallout. After seeing the footage of the stranger in my house, I knew I couldn't stay passive anymore. My instincts screamed at me to confront Lisa right then and there, to demand an explanation for why some guy was walking through our front door while I wasn't home. But I stopped myself. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny it, twist the story, or make me out to be paranoid. No, I needed to be smarter about this. The first step in my plan was simple: gather more evidence. One recording of a man entering my house was significant, but I wanted to make sure there was no room for excuses. I reviewed the footage from the previous days, combing through every clip to see if there were other moments I'd missed. Sure enough, I found more. The same man, tall, dark-haired, and way too comfortable in my home, had been there twice before. He wasn't just a one-time visitor. This was a pattern. I saved every clip, creating a folder on my laptop labeled Truth. It felt ridiculous, almost surreal to be archiving evidence of my own wife's betrayal. But I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The next step was trickier. I wanted to test Lisa, to see how far she'd go to cover her tracks. That weekend, I told her I'd be taking Michael out for a movie night, just the two of us. Lisa seemed a little too eager to let us go, her smile forced as she said, "That sounds like fun. You two enjoy yourself." While Michael and I went out, I left the cameras running. The entire time we were at the movie, I couldn't focus. I kept checking my phone, waiting for another motion alert. Sure enough, about an hour into the film, my phone buzzed. There he was again, the same guy, walking through the front door with a bottle of wine in his hand. This time, I couldn't sit back and just watch. I excused myself from the theater, telling Michael I'd take a quick call. In the lobby, I stared at the live feed, watching as they sat in the kitchen, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. My blood boiled as I saw Lisa lean forward, her hand brushing his arm. They were so casual, so comfortable, as if they weren't breaking every rule of trust and decency. I saved the footage and went back to the movie, my mind racing. I couldn't let Michael see how furious I was. This wasn't his burden to bear, but in that moment, I made up my mind. The time for waiting was over. It was time to confront Lisa and make her face the truth. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. The days of keeping quiet and watching Lisa lie to my face were over. I needed answers, and I needed her to know that I wasn't the clueless husband she probably thought I was. It was time to confront her. Lisa was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like it was just another normal day. Michael was upstairs, still getting ready for school. I sat down across from her, placing my phone on the table. My hands were steady, but inside I was raging. "Lisa," I started, my voice calm but firm. "Who's the man that's been coming to our house while I'm not home?" Her head snapped up, and for a second I saw panic flash across her face. But Lisa being Lisa, she quickly composed herself, her expression shifting to one of feigned confusion. "What are you talking about, Eric?" she said, her tone almost too casual. I didn't blink. "Don't play dumb. I've seen him, tall guy, dark hair. He's been here at least 3 times. Her face paled slightly, but she kept up the act. "Eric, that's ridiculous. You're imagining things." "Really?" I said, unlocking my phone and pulling up the footage. I turned the screen toward her, showing the clip of her and the man sitting in the kitchen. "Explain this." Her mouth opened, then closed again as she stared at the screen. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her coffee mug down. "Eric." "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaking now. "Oh, really? Then what is it, Lisa?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been sneaking around with some guy while our son and I were out." "It was just once," she blurted out, tears welling in her eyes. "It didn't mean anything, I swear." I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head in disbelief. Once? Do you think I'm an idiot, Lisa? I've got multiple videos of him coming in and out of this house. He brought wine, for God's sake. You've been lying to me, to Michael, to yourself. She broke down then, her tears spilling over as she tried to defend herself. I didn't mean for it to happen, she sobbed. I was lonely, Eric. You've been so distant, always working, always distracted. I just needed someone to talk to. Don't you dare try to pin this on me, I said, my voice rising. If you felt lonely, you could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt, but no, you chose to sneak around behind my back like a coward. Her sobs grew louder, but I wasn't done. And what about Michael? I continued. Did you even think about how this would affect him? Do you know he's the one who told me about the man in our house? Our 10-year-old son noticed something was wrong before I did. How do you think that makes me feel, Lisa? She buried her face in her hands, crying uncontrollably. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry, Eric. I'll do anything to fix this. Just please don't give up on us. I stood up, my chest heaving. You don't get to decide that now. I need time to think, and Michael doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. I'll be staying somewhere else for a while. Before she could respond, I turned and walked out, my mind spinning with anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. For the first time, I realized that the woman I thought I knew was just a facade, and the life we'd built was hanging by a thread. Leaving the house that day wasn't just about me, it was about Michael. He didn't need to see the shouting, the tears, or the mess his mother and I had created. It wasn't fair to him, and as much as I wanted to stay and make Lisa face the consequences of her actions, I knew I had to prioritize our son's emotional well-being. That night I stayed at a friend's place. Michael was still at home with Lisa, and I couldn't stop thinking about him, what he was seeing, what he might be feeling. And then at one point I realized I was just asking him for one thing. The next morning I went back to the house early before Lisa woke up. I wanted to talk to Michael to explain things in a way that wouldn't leave him feeling confused or, worse, responsible. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal and flipping through a comic book. His face lit up when he saw me, which only made the weight on my chest heavier. I sat down next to him, ruffling his hair. Hey, bud, I said gently. Can we talk for a minute? He nodded, setting down his spoon. Are you mad at Mom? He asked, his voice small. I sighed, struggling to find the right words. Things are complicated between your mom and me right now, I said. But I need you to know something. None of this is your fault. You've done absolutely nothing wrong. Michael looked down, fiddling with the edge of his comic book. But I told you about the man, he said quietly. Did I make things worse? No, I said quickly, leaning forward to meet his eyes. You didn't make anything worse. In fact, you did the right thing by telling me. You're an amazing kid, Michael, and I'm so proud of you. He nodded, though he still looked unsure. Are you going to leave us? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm not leaving you, buddy, I promised. No matter what happens between your mom and me, I'll always be here for you. That's never going to change. I pulled him into a hug, and for a moment, everything else faded away. No matter how messy things got with Lisa, Michael was my anchor. He was the one thing I knew I had to protect above all else. Later that day, I had a private conversation with Lisa. I told her in no uncertain terms that Michael needed to be shielded from the chaos. Whatever happens between us, we owe it to him to keep things as stable as possible, I said. He deserves that much. Lisa agreed, though she looked heartbroken. I don't want him to think I'm a bad mom, she said softly. He doesn't, I replied. And I'll make sure he doesn't, but you need to show him that you're still there for him, even while we figure this out. If you're not looking out for him yet, I don't want to make it a while before he puts you in shield. For the next few days, I stayed out of the house, giving Lisa space while making sure Michael knew I was still around. We spent time together after school, going to the park or grabbing ice cream. I wanted to show him that no matter how uncertain things felt, he could always count on me. After a few days of back and forth between Lisa and me, it became clear that we needed to make some concrete decisions about our future. Staying in limbo wasn't fair to anyone, least of all Michael. Every time I saw him, I was reminded of how much he relied on us to provide stability. A stability that Lisa's actions had shattered. Lisa called me one evening, her voice filled with desperation. Eric, we need to talk. Please just come home so we can figure this out. I agreed, but only because I knew this conversation had to happen. When I got to the house, Lisa was sitting at the dining table, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, hopeful yet afraid, and for a moment I felt a pang of pity for her. But it wasn't enough to erase what she'd done. I want to make this work, she started, her voice trembling. I know I screwed up, and I hate myself for it, but I love you, Eric. I love our family. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Do you even understand how much damage you've caused? I asked. This isn't just about you and me, Lisa. This is about Michael. He saw that man in our house. He knew something was wrong before I did. Do you have any idea how much that's going to affect him? She shook her head. Sorry, you're right. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. I know I've hurt both of you, but I'll do anything to make it right. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. Just don't give up on us. Her words sounded sincere, but trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. It's not that simple, Lisa, I said, my voice firm. You broke something that's going to take a long time to fix. And I don't even know if it's fixable. She sobbed quietly, burying her face in her hands. Please, she whispered, give me a chance. We talked late into the night, going over everything. How we'd gotten to this point, what she was willing to do to make amends, and what I needed if I was even going to consider staying. She agreed to cut all contact with Tom, to hand over full transparency when it came to her phone, her schedule, and anything else I needed to feel secure. She also agreed to start individual and couples counseling, which I told her was non-negotiable. But even with all those promises, I couldn't make a decision on the spot. I need time, I told her. Time to figure out if I can ever trust you again. This isn't something I can decide tonight. Lisa nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. I understand, she said. Take as much time as you need. Just please don't shut me out. For now, we agreed that Michael would stay with me during the week while we sorted things out. Lisa would visit him a few times a week, but I made it clear that our interactions would be limited until I had a clearer picture of what I wanted. As I drove back to my temporary place that night, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe that Lisa could change, that our marriage could survive this. But another part of me, the part still raw from the betrayal, as much as I hated the idea, I knew I needed to confront Tom. It wasn't just about what he had done with Lisa, it was about closure for me. I needed to look him in the eye to see what kind of person would walk into another man's home and destroy a family without a second thought. Through the camera footage, I'd seen enough to confirm his identity, and he was a manager at a real estate firm downtown. One afternoon, I decided it was time to pay him a visit. I didn't tell Lisa what I was doing, and I didn't really have a plan. All I knew was that I had questions and he owed me answers. When I arrived at his office, I asked the receptionist to let him know I was there. She looked confused, but told me to wait. A few minutes later, Tom appeared, looking just as smug and confident as he had in the camera footage. His smile faltered when he saw me. Eric, right? He said, trying to sound calm. I didn't expect to see you here, I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Let's talk, somewhere private. He hesitated, but eventually led me to a small meeting room. As soon as the door closed, I turned to face him. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked, my voice low but firm. Do you understand the damage you've caused? Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I'm not proud of what happened, he said. But Lisa told me things were bad between you two. She made it sound like your marriage was already over. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lose my temper. Let me make one thing clear, I said, stepping closer. My marriage wasn't over. She lied to you just like she lied to me. But you, what kind of man steps into another guy's home knowing there's a family involved? He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't think it would go this far, he muttered. It was supposed to be casual. Casual? I repeated, my voice rising. You came into my house. You sat in my kitchen. My 10-year-old son saw you and thought you were a family friend. Does that sound casual to you? Tom's expression shifted from guilt to discomfort. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, he said weakly. I'm sorry, okay? Sorry doesn't fix this, I shot back. Stay away from my family. Don't call her. Don't text her. Don't even think about showing up at my house again. If I catch you anywhere near us, I'll make sure everyone in your life knows exactly what kind of man you are. Do you understand me? He nodded quickly, his bravado crumbling. I understand, he said. You won't hear from me again. I left the office without another word, my anger still simmering but mixed with a strange sense of relief. Confronting him didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me some closure. He was out of the picture now, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was regaining control. When I got back to my car, I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of the confrontation settle. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was a step forward. Now, it was up to Lisa and me to decide if there was anything left worth saving. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think. about that story. Have a good day and bye.